in his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's children, and the children of Manshir, the son of Manasseh, were born and raised on Joseph's knee. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up out of this land, to the land which he promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, saying, "God will surely visit you and take you and return you to Canaan, and you shall carry my bones up from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So the title of today's message is A Coffin in Egypt. Now the book of Genesis is a book of beginnings, right? It's a book of beginnings. You know, we have many things are mentioned for the first time in Genesis. We have sin, murder, death, marriage, childbirth, rain. All these things are first mentioned in Genesis. And interestingly enough, this chapter 24, ends with a coffin. It ends with a coffin. It ends with the death of Joseph. And Joseph, when he dies, Joseph is probably the most important man in Egypt, and yet he reminds his family that he must be taken out of Egypt. He must be taken to the land that God promised Abraham. So he's very concerned about that, and he tells them particularly that you have to take me. When God takes you from here, you have to take me from this place. So he died at the age of 110. And he did not want to be buried in a pyramid. You know, Egyptian pyramids are world famous. Even now in 2024, we're still marveling at these pyramids. We still haven't discovered the actual purpose of a pyramid. We still haven't, you know. We say that it's to bury the pharaohs and all that, but these pyramids are built on astronomical lines. That is, they are aligned to the stars in the universe. You know, pyramids are they're aligned to the stars in the universe. So they have so much more. And so Egypt is a land that's specialized in burials, right? But Joseph wanted nothing to do with that. He wanted his bones to be buried in a coffin, and he wanted that coffin to be taken out of Egypt when God was going to take them out. So he gave them instructions. And for over 360 years, you know, after Joseph died, the Israelites became slaves. We know that, right? And they remained in Egypt for over 360 years. And for 360 years, this coffin remained there, just like that, with the bones of Joseph. This coffin remained there. And this coffin was preaching to them. What was the coffin telling them? This is not our home. This is not our home. Our home is in Canaan, the place where God has promised Abraham. Just imagine, you know, Abraham, Isaac, so many generations are passed. And Joseph fervently believes that there's a land that God has promised us, and he's going to take us to that land. And you have to take my bones with you when you go from here. And the coffin, you know, this is what the coffin of Joseph was telling them for over 360 years after he died. And the message of the coffin, you know, because all of us are also going to die, right? And we're all going to be buried in a coffin, right? So what does this coffin say? What is Joseph's coffin? What was it telling them? First of all, it was telling them that this is not our home. Egypt is not our home. Just as this world is not our home, Egypt is not our home. We do not belong. We're not permanent dwellers in Egypt. We're here for a period. We're here for a time. God had a purpose in bringing us here, but this is not our home. We're going to go from here. So it's a message of passing. That's the first thing that the coffin tells us, that this place is not our home. And the following lines were written on tombstones. I like some of these lines written on tombstones. So this particular tombstone said, "Pause, stranger, when you pass me by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you will be. So prepare for death and follow me." This was written on a gravestone, okay? So, "Pause, stranger, as you pass me by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am not now, so you will be. So prepare for death and follow me." And someone, a passerby, read this, and he scratched something onto that gravestone. He scratched something onto that gravestone, and his words were, "To follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went." To follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went. So, because all of us, after we die, we want to go to heaven, right? We want to go to heaven. So, what we understand about this life is a time of preparation. This life is not our permanent home. This world is not our permanent home. This life is a life of preparation. That's why we're here. We're here to prepare ourselves to go to heaven. That's God's plan. And God has a purpose in placing us here. As Proverbs 27:1 says, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." You don't know what a day may bring. Just one day and everything is different. Everything is completely different. And we know about the rich fool in the Bible. The rich fool who said that I'm going to accumulate more and more and more. And then God says, "I'm going to take your life away from you." And he lost everything. He lost everything. So, first of all, this is what the coffin, Joseph's coffin, tells us, that our life here this is not our permanent address. This is not our permanent address. You've all heard of Billy Graham, right? Billy Graham always said, "Death is a change of address." That's what death is. Death is a change of address. That's all death is, a change of address. So we're not permanent dwellers in this world. And it also preaches a message of promise. There's also a promise in this. There's also a promise in the coffin. Because as Joseph lay dying, he impressed upon his hearers that one day God would visit them and God would take them. He really believes it, and he tells them that's going to happen. It only happened almost 400 years later, but still he believes it, and he says this is going to happen. And God is going to take us to a land. What kind of a land? A land flowing with milk and honey. That's where God is going to take us. That's where God is going to take us. So he impresses them about this. He tells them this is our hope. We're going to a better land. We're all going to a better land from here. And so many people don't like to think of death and dying, right? Death and dying are not very interesting topics because we are full of life. And as long as we are alive, we're only concerned about life. We're only concerned about life. But Joseph was telling them, we all have to go from here. This is just a permanent, this is just a temporary dwelling. And so the absolute hope that God is going to take us from here to the promised land. I was thinking of the promised land. We know what's happening in the promised land now, right? The attack of Hamas, and the whole world is turning against Israel now. The whole world is turning against Israel. In fact, something interesting happened. Did anybody hear about that? Yesterday, Israel was able to rescue 4 of the hostages, and 120 of them are still in the hands of Hamas, but out of them, Israel rescued 4 from the hands of Hamas. Anyhow, and we know that no one has suffered the way the Jews have suffered. Nobody. In fact, everybody is talking about where they are protecting themselves. What Israel is doing is Israel is protecting itself. That's all. Trying to take back the people who have been captured by Hamas. Anyhow, so what the promised land. And anyhow, so God is going to take us to a better land, a wonderful land, a promised land. That's what he was telling them, a far better world. And that was what the tomb of Joseph, that's what the coffin of Joseph was telling them. That's what the coffin of Joseph was telling them. And as believers, we have something better. What do we have? We have an empty coffin. We have an empty coffin, right? There's the grave of Jesus Christ is empty. So that is our hope. We have an empty coffin. The Israelites had this full coffin, but we have an empty coffin to give us hope and comfort. That tells us about the promised land, the land that we're going to go to. And it also, and I like this. So as believers, we can go either by means of the Undertaker, right? Or if the rapture occurs, how will we go? We will go by means of the Uppertaker. I like that word. It's a coinage. If we remain here, we'll go by means of the Undertaker, right? We'll die and we'll be buried, and the Undertaker will take care of things. If the rapture occurs, we'll be taken by the Uppertaker. Almighty God is going to take us. So that's the hope in which we live. And Joseph's words also talk about the patience, because the Israelites are a very patient people, right? Even after, imagine this, Joseph was he was telling them about something that took place almost 400 years later.
Yes.
400 years later.
Yes.
And it was a message of patience. It was telling them that we wait. We trust and we wait. But we need to trust and wait in faithfulness. That is what we need to do. That's what he was telling them. That's what he was telling them. Because misfortune is part of our earthly experience. All of us experience misfortune. There isn't a single human being who does not experience misfortune. Not a single person. But let us remain in hope. Let us remain with patience. Let us remain in hope. That is what he was telling them. And when we wait in patience, and the way waiting also is trusting and hoping. Waiting implies trusting and hoping. We're not waiting in desperation. We're not waiting without hope. We're waiting in hope. We're waiting in hope. And whatever happens to us, whatever happens to us, as we read in Psalm 37:22. I'm just going to read Psalm 37:22. It says, "The steps of a good and righteous man are directed and established by the Lord, and he delights in his way and blesses his path. When he falls, he will not be hurled down, because the Lord is the one who holds his hand and sustains him, and to bring into our lives the things he knows are best for us." So we will fall, but what does it say here? When he falls, he will not be hurled down. We are not victims again. We are not. Sometimes we fall and we think we are hurled down. We think Satan has tricked us and cheated us, but we are never hurled down. Even when we fall, God has a purpose. All we need to do is wait and trust. Trust and wait on him. That's all we need to do. We are never hurled down. And then it also preaches a message of possession. It preaches a message of possession. So First of all, before this, it preached a message of patience, and before that, what was it? A message of anybody? A message of passing, yeah. A message of passing, a message of patience, and a message of possession. What's the possession that he's talking about? His dying words were a reminder that God has given us a land. God has given us a land. You know, there's only one place in the whole world that was given by God to his people, and that is Israel, right? And that's the only place in the world that the whole world has turned against now. The only place in this entire world that God has given to his people is Israel. And that is the only place that the whole world is focusing on now and hating on now. Just look at that. Just look at that. Only one place in the world that God has given to his people. And so that's the possession. That's the possession that the Israelites had. And God tells them in Genesis 15:16. Genesis 15:16 goes like this. Then in the fourth generation, your descendants shall return here to Canaan, the land of promise, for the wickedness and the guilt of the Amorites is not yet complete. So, why were the Israelites in Egypt for so many years? So that the wickedness of the Amorites could be complete. Because the Amorites were the people who dwelt in Canaan. And God was even giving them a chance. You know, God gives everybody a chance. People who don't know him. The Israelites are the people who know him, and God keeps them in slavery for 400 more years. Why? So that the people who do not know him, the Amorites, can turn to him. Can turn to him. That's the God who we worship. So that's why the Israelites were in Egypt for so long, so that the wickedness of the Amorites could get over. And interestingly, you know, as I told you, the land, the promised land, Canaan, Israel, Abraham, what did Abraham have of the promised land? Just a bit of land that he bought to bury his wife Sarah in. That is all he had, right? That's all he had. And this is 400 years, 300 years, 350, 400 years. And even after that, the Jewish kingdom, it survived for around 1,300 years. You know, even after it was established, it survived for around 1,300 years. And then once again, it was destroyed again and again, but it survived for 1,300 years. And then for the last 2,000 years, it was not there, and it only came back into existence in 1948. And so, you know, the reason is no other nation that has been completely crushed by other nations has ever come back. No other nation has come back. The only reason Israel has resurrected is because God's hand is on it. And that's the reason the world hates Israel also. That's the only reason that the world hates Israel. Now the whole world, you know, colleges in the US, all students they're all on strike against Israel. Okay, and so the land of Canaan, that's the land that he's talking about. And now, actually I mentioned this before, all of us are here, right? We are all yearning for this land, the promised land, heaven, right? And so this pastor is preaching one day, and he asks his church, how many of you want to go to heaven? And everybody's hands go up. Do you remember this? Everybody's hands go up. And then he asks, how many of you want to go to heaven today? And everybody's looking this way and that way. Then no one's hand is going up. They're looking this way and that way. And so, you know, we're all here. We all want to go to heaven. That's the promised land. We're not dwellers in this world. That we are heaven bound. We know all that. But we have so many things of interest in this world, right? There's so many things of interest in this world. So anyhow, For nearly 400 years, 360, 400 years, this coffin was preaching to the Israelites when they were enslaved in Egypt, and was telling them, wait in hope. God has a wonderful land. We're not going to be slaves forever. God is a God of promise. God will teach us patience. God will take us to a wonderful land. This coffin was telling them. Okay, and this is again another story. 3 friends were killed in a car accident, and so this is a story, all right? And so they're in this orientation for heaven, before heaven, and somebody asks them, or they're asked, when your family is standing all around your casket, what do you want your friends and family to say? What would you like your friends and family to say about you? And the first guy says, I want them to say that I was a great doctor and I was a great family man. And the second guy says, I would like them to say that I was a wonderful husband and a good teacher. And the third person says, I just want them to say, look, he's moving. What does that mean? He's not dead. Look, he's moving just means this body is not dead. He's not dead. So all of us just want to live. We just want to live here, right? So all these other guys says, I wanted them to say I'm a good doctor, a great husband, a great this, a great that. But this guy says, I just wanted them to say, look, he's moving. He's not dead. Come on, help him up, he's not dead. That's what I want them to. So, like I said, we're all heaven bound, but we're very much attached to the earth. We're attached to the earth. So, this old coffin in Egypt is delivering a message today. It's a message that speaks to your heart and to my heart. We are here for a purpose. God has placed us here for a purpose. We might go through difficult situations, but God has a purpose. God always has a purpose. And God's purposes are better than anything we can ever imagine. Always, unconditionally. Like I said before, we're praying about so many things, and if we're praying faithfully, and what we are praying for doesn't come to pass, what does that mean? It means God has an even better plan than what we prayed for. That is why it's not coming to pass, because God has an even better plan than what we. So that's the God we worship, right? And He has placed us here with a purpose, and He wants us to be faithful children, because only if we are faithful can He work through us. He has placed us here for a short period, but unless we are faithful to Him and loyal to Him, He cannot work for us. We are useless. We tie His hands. So let us be sure that we do not tie God's hands, that we remain in faith and we walk in faith and we glorify His name, because that is all we have to do. All we have to do is remain in faithfulness. Sometimes when things go wrong, I often think, how is this going to work out? How is that going to work out? So many complications. Because if you look, Satan will show you all the complications that are not even there. Most of these complications that Satan sometimes shows us are not even there. But when we are willing to listen to him, we inspire him to come up with bigger and bigger complications. So that is all. So all we need to do is to be faithful to God, trust in Him, wait patiently, and worship Him, and He will take care of everything.